we are going to jump right in. And we're going to build a little, we're going to call a shopping list app tonight. It's essentially a to-do list, to-do app, but we're gonna call it our shopping list. So let me share with you the. We're not doing a to-do. We're doing a shopping list. It's not a to-do. It's funny because the to-do app is like, it's the quintessential how does a framework or try something out or learn something type of thing to build. And the reason is it's pretty good. It has full CRUD capabilities. You can create items, read them, update them, delete them, etc. And that really is what we're looking for when we're learning something, is to build, kind of see all of the main features really fast. So that's why to-do lists are very popular. Yes, and it's different in every single framework or language that you would use it to do it in. Honestly, like you'll see, like as a software developer, I'm sure you've already seen too many to-do lists to count, but they are prevalent in the software world. Everyone does them. And there's even, I think there's a site that like will teach you how to build a to-do list in like every single language or something crazy. All right. So let's come look in here and see what we got going on. So I'm going to close that for a moment, and we can just see our shopping list. And we'll look at, we have an array, just like in our Hogwarts app. We have an array of groceries, okay? These are going to be groceries in our to-do list. Our shopping list. Oh, I was talking about to-dos so much. So this is going to be an array of groceries, right, in our shopping list. We're going to have a name. Each one of these is an object, obviously. We're going to have a name, whatever the name is. We're going to have the ID. So think of the ID as, I don't know, a barcode scanner ID or something like that. And we are going to have a Boolean, whether it was purchased already or not. Okay. So the three items that we're going to have on our object in our groceries list. All right, so we have this predefined list already. We don't need it, but we're just going to have it so that we can view it being displayed on the screen. Next thing, and the only, I should mention, component we have is our app component for right now. What type of component is our app component? I didn't write this, so man, thank you. Our app component is a class component. Why is it a class component? What is the reason we are using a class component here versus a functional component? Because it's classy. Yeah, because we need state. Okay, we are using state. Currently, we don't need it, but we're going to use state. All right. So we are using state. You're going to see some weird shorthand here. If you ever see an object with just a word in it, this is essentially shorthand for this. It's just saying that the item that we are going to give this the value is going to have the same name as the key. So in this case, we don't need to actually give it the key value pair. But if this makes it more comfortable, and I'm going to write it like this so we really get the hang of it. This is a newer feature. This is the ES6 feature in JavaScript, which saves a lot of time. This is just Code Sandbox. I'm not writing on my own text editor for right now. Yep. Let's see. Jason, we'll talk about another reason to use a class component other than state next week. And it's essentially lifecycle methods. So there is a reason to use a class component for even if you don't have state. But most of the time, you're using a class component simply for the state. So cool. Then in here, we have our constructor, we have our super, and what is super doing for us? It is calling. So it's calling the parent constructor. So I saw that in there from Jonathan and some others as well. It's calling the parent's constructor, right? And what is it doing is it's then giving us all of the cool features from the parent. So whatever the parent gives us, whether it be something like props, which is going to be a just a property on it, or methods like the lifecycle methods we'll find out about next week. It gives us all that cool stuff. What's another, what is a method that the parent constructor gives us that we're going to use a lot, especially today? Does not give us render, strangely enough, right? We have to give it render. It doesn't give us render. That's the one thing it doesn't give us. Yeah, set state actually is the one I was looking for. It does give us a ton more stuff, but set state is the one I was looking for. But yeah, it doesn't give us render. It's the one thing it doesn't give us. That's why we have to include it. If we don't have render in here, this component will break. Okay, it'll break the whole app because it's the one it doesn't give us. So then we call our super. We set our state. We're going to give it, remember, state is always going to be an object, and we'll have our key value pairs on here. In this case, we're going to set the key of groceries to this array, okay? And that's going to be our initial seed state. We're going to go in and manipulate this state. And why wouldn't we, quick question, just manipulate this array? Why would we set it on the state and then manipulate that state? What's a reason for that? Ooh. I have a to trigger re-render, and then I have a prevent re-renders, make it dynamic, reusability. In case you need to go back to the original, sure, these are all great examples. And the main thing is that React isn't listening for the arbitrary array called groceries. It is listening for our state. Okay, and that's the reason we use set state. So it knows that when the state changes, it needs to update whatever is using that state. So when the state changes, it will then trigger its own re-render. And that's what we want, right? Because we want the UI to react to the data. And that isn't even a pun. That's why they call this React. So that's the reason we use state rather than just manipulating this. And then like I said, you can call something called force re-render, but really if you ever call that, then you're probably messing something up somewhere, and you'll need to figure that out. You should never call force re-render or force render. Cool. So now in our render method, right, it's a render method. We are always going to return something. We can return either JSX or React.create element. Return JSX because it's way easier. And have we talked about class name yet? I'm not sure because I wasn't with you last week. Cool. All right, so we don't use class, we use class name, right? So we have CSS in here, just normal, regular old CSS in our styles.css. And we can use regular class names. Is this an HTML element? It's not an HTML element, right? This is JSX. So keep that in mind. It will be an HTML element. It will be represented by an HTML element eventually, but it's not right now. So we can, just understand that. Keep that in mind when you're writing React. It looks like you're writing HTML, but you're not. All right. Then we have a couple of divs, we have a header, and we have a shopping list. All right. We are rendering our app to the screen, and that is what we have. Any questions so far on what we've got here? All right, so if we want to render all of these items in the grocery list to the screen, what do we need to do? What's the first step we should do? Map? Any other suggestions? We should map the groceries, pull the array into state. So we have done that already, Robert, but keen observation. So we have done the groceries are in the state now. Create a component. I think these are all great. Set state, not quite yet. We will set state in a minute, but we have initially set our state with those groceries. And all we want to do, we could just map over this array of groceries, but we don't want to do that anymore. We want to pretend like our app has gone somewhere to a faraway server, gotten this data, and given it to us, and we don't have access to it. Okay, so let's not even pay attention to those groceries up there anymore. So we can do a couple of things here. We can create a new component, absolutely, and we will be doing that. But first, let's just get it to appear on the screen, right? So let's just map over that state and get it to appear on the screen. So what do we need to put into the JSX to tell JSX that we are using plain old JavaScript? Yep, open and close brackets, curly brackets. So this is telling JSX, do not render this as JSX. Render this as JavaScript. Run it as JavaScript, okay? And now inside of here, we can put any JavaScript we want. I was going to say, how do I map over the state? Remember, in a class component, you always must use this. So if it's props, you're going to say this dot props. If it's state, you're going to say this dot state. Okay? And in this case, we're going to say this dot state, which is this object, and we want to grab the groceries array. So we're going to this dot state dot groceries. And now we know that what data type is this dot state dot groceries? Ooh. I have array. I have a lot of objects. Array. Okay, seems like we're pretty torn here. Array of objects. I like that. So this dot state dot groceries, right? So whatever this value is an array. Okay, and it is an array of objects. So we know that on arrays we can use filter, we can use each, we can use reduce, we can use map. We're going to use map most often in React. You might see reduce used every now and then. You might see filter used every now and then. Filter works pretty well, and we're actually going to use filter tonight. But we're going to use map right now. Most of the time when you're displaying things on the screen, you're going to use map. So let's go map. And now we can map over this array. I want to make sure that my CSS is going to work well. I am going to wrap this in a div. This is not a requirement. This is just a requirement of my CSS. Code Sandbox has some weird formatting sometimes. There we go. Okay, so it's going to give me an error because I'm like, I'm not giving it any kind of method or function or anything. But let's do this. I was like 2 letters off, Christopher. I have been known to accidentally mistype some profane things in there. And it's always an accident. So what argument does map take? Hark back to our JavaScript days. Ooh, all right. Map takes one argument. No matter what array you run map on, it takes one argument, and that is a callback. Okay? We must supply this a function. And in fact, it says even in here in our error, let's look at our error, it says undefined is not a function. So we know that it's looking into here and it's expecting a function and it's getting undefined because there's no argument in here. And I can even do this. Let's put a string in here. Dan is not a function, right? So we know we can read this error and see where the error happened is that I put a string in here and it expected a function, okay? So what we're going to do, and errors are not always the most telling. Sometimes they're really strange, especially in React, but most of the time you can read through your error and you can read through your call stack even and find out exactly where the issue happened, and it'll point out and see like there. It's like, that did not happen at render, it happened somewhere else. But most of the time you can read through it and get the actual what's wrong with it. All right. So, that was a weird character. All right. So in map, now there's a function here, and it's like, cool, I got it, right? We're not getting an error anymore because the function is in here now. So what argument does map take? What's the first argument that map takes? The first argument map takes, oh, sorry, you're right. The first argument the callback takes, excuse me. You were right, Justin. It's the item, right? So it's going to iterate over that array for each item, and it's going to give us that item back. And Jason was right. It gives us the item. It takes an optional second and third array, argument, which is the index and which is the full array. For most of the, well, actually, I'm going to say we're going to use index a lot. We shouldn't, but we're going to right now. Anyone know why? It's a bonus question if you know. Yep, for our key. So let me make sure that my CSS is going to be on point here. So for each item in here, I want to return something from it. Okay, I want to return some JSX from it. And so right now I am going to write some JSX. Remember, you must always return inside of map. If you don't return, it's nothing's gonna happen. So I'm gonna do a little bit of JSX here, class name. I'm gonna call this item. Wish code sandbox had auto. And then in here, all I want to do is write the name of the item. Okay. I want to answer this question really quick. Why is it bad to use the index? As Jason said, the index can change, right? If we remove an item from this array, then all of the indexes of that array change. And so then it re-renders the entire page. It's not bad per se, it's just bad practice. Most of these, and actually, we don't need index. Does anyone know why we don't need the index on this one? Yeah, because we have an ID inside, and this ID will hope, but should be guaranteed unique. Okay, so we have an ID in here, so we don't even need to use the index for this one. But I'm going to do a little paragraph. Almost there. So now I want to write the name only. I don't care about anything else. I just want to write the name inside of this paragraph tag. How can I write that? And also I need to put the key on here. Yep. Let's see. Most of you are on the right page. I think all of you, and let's see. We're going to write item, right? What is item? Item is this entire object. And then we're going to say dot name. And we got it, okay? One thing I am missing is the key, and you want to do that on your topmost element up here. And notice that I'm saying the key equals, and I'm putting brackets. What do those brackets mean? Those brackets mean run this JavaScript. So I'm going to put item.id. And now we'll have key, and now we shouldn't get any weird React key errors there. Cool. So we've got our shopping list appearing on the screen now. All right. Any questions about this, especially this map portion? What is map returning? What is this returning? It's a new array, right? And what is that inside of that new array? Each item? Yes, but mapped, so it's changed. Ooh, all right. Let's do it. Let's see. So let's walk through it. This goes through for each item. It's going to put this JSX into a new array, right? So this is going to be an array of JSX elements, okay? And then we're going to just get that array of JSX elements back. React automatically knows if there is an array of JSX elements, it is going to render those to the screen, okay? It knows to do that. So that's why we use map, because it's going to allow us to take whatever data we have, and it's going to allow us to create a new element based on that and return that to React. Any questions on that? Let's see, John, is there any advantage in setting a variable under the render method? You mean like inside of the render method? You would probably, there are use cases for that. I'm not going to say that there's an advantage to doing that. It's really going to be on a case-by-case basis, but you will do that eventually in the future. Or create a variable inside of your render method, or you could do this, you could say like this is possible if you put the right keyword in and then did this. That's possible. You can absolutely do that and then just return the items JSX. I don't think there's an advantage to that at all, unless you're doing some very intense programmatical something to your array, maybe making a API call for every single item or something like that. You might want to do outside of the return, but not really. How would that work if your array is being updated dynamically within state? Robert, I'm assuming you're talking about what we have currently on the screen, correct? It works. It just works, right? So what happens when let's go through it. What happens when our state is updated? Our state is updated. We're going to use set state. It's going to change the state. React is then going to say, hey, the state changed. Which items on here, and that's where the key comes into play, which items on here have changed? And then it's going to create the virtual DOM. It's going to compare the virtual DOM, the new version to the old version, find out exactly what needs changed, and then change that on the DOM. So it's going to cause a re-render, and when we have a re-render, we run the render method again, right? And that's going to run this again. So anything that's changed in state will get updated automatically. Okay, and that's the beautiful thing about React is it does that. Jason, I'm not familiar with the RNG term. For the vast majority of creating, you could, I mean, that goes to the, is it truly random? But the vast majority of RIDs are going to come from a database. So you're going to have a unique constraint on your database, and you could absolutely do that. We're going to use date.now today just to give us a Unix timestamp, but obviously there are issues with that, because if two items are created the exact same millisecond, then that's going to be not unique, but it'll be unique enough for us. But most of your stuff is going to come from a database with a unique constraint on the ID, and it will be guaranteed to be unique. There are many, many, many different names or ways of creating. You could do that, Paul. That would work out really well. Many different ways of creating quote unquote random numbers or IDs. UUID is the way to go, honestly. But so I like Aaron's idea. For our case, it works, right? And for most cases, it works too. Many database uses incremental IDs. So let's keep on moving through here. So what we're going to do right now is we are going to factor this entire thing out, the shopping list out, into its own component. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a directory called components, and I'm going to create a file in here called grocery list. All right, I'm just going to create a new React component. So give me a second. And I'm going to export default. So let's think about this right now. What type of component should we use for this right here? We're going to take this out. We're going to take this whole piece out, and we're going to display it in here. What type of component should we use? Got a couple functionals, functional. Why functional? Why not? Ooh, touche. We don't need state, right? We don't have a need for state in here. Our state for this massive application is being stored at our application level up here. We don't need the state. So we can create a functional component. So I can just write function. I can write function grocery list. We'll just write it out. And then what object, or excuse me, what argument does our function take? Always going to take a props argument. What if there are no props? This is still going to be here. It's just going to be an empty object, right? So now what more do we need to write inside of this functional component that will render this to the screen? The beautiful functional components is they're so fast to write, right? We just write return. We don't need to worry about constructor or render method. Remove that, return that, boom, boom, boom. All right. Now, what do we need to do? We want to render this grocery list inside of our index, inside of our. First thing we need to do. Yeah, we need to import it. So we're going to come up here. I like to keep my third-party imports separate. So we're just going to type grocery list from grocery list. Notice that there is no need to write .js on here because it automatically knows it's a .js because it's being run through Node. But so we don't need to write .js. If you do write .js, totally fine, but you don't need to. All right, and the next thing we need to do is Randy, got it.
let's come in here and we'll say grocery list. And it should appear on the screen. Oh, that's why. Thank you, Rain. Wasn't the error I was looking for, but I was looking for an error. All right. So we're getting an error now. Let's look through this error and see what's happening. First, we're getting cannot read property state of undefined. Okay, so we're calling state somewhere that state doesn't exist. So let's look through this error. We'll see grocery list is on the top, and it's telling us the location of our error. Where components grocery list, it's telling us it's line 6, and even it's giving us the character number of character 12. Okay, so being able to go through and read your errors like this and being able to understand what they mean, errors are not the enemy, errors are our friend. All right, you're going to be spending way more time looking at errors than you are looking at awesome, beautiful code. So get friendly with them and learn how to read them. Start looking through them and understand what they mean. So let's go check it out. We have our components, grocery list, line 6, boom, 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 and we can even count if you want all the way over to 12. Okay, so it's saying here that this dot state doesn't exist. No state of undefined. So this is undefined. So, as many of you have keenly posted, we need to change this dot state to props. Easy peasy. But now we're getting another error. Okay, and what's our error here saying? It's saying that groceries is undefined, right? Can't read property map of undefined. It's saying that groceries is undefined. Why is groceries undefined? It's not in this file, okay, but it's a prop, right? We're being passed. It's just a prop, so we can get props. So let's go look at here. We're not giving this component any props yet. All right, we need to make sure that we give it a prop. And if we want to have something called groceries on here, we need to give this component a prop called groceries. Okay, and then we can say this dot state dot groceries, and now we're working. Okay, so that's the reason we have to give it that prop. We have to pass that data to that in order to properly do it properly. Cool. Any questions on that? And now we're receiving that array in our props, and voila, works just like it. Could it pass the entire state? Yes, you could, Edgar. But you really don't want to do that. I mean, yeah, there could be a time when you do. But remember that when props change, just like when state is updated, when props change, your component is re-rendered. So a lot of times if you pass the entire state and things change on the state that you have no need for in this component, it's still going to re-render this component. So that's why you don't want to do that. You only want to pass the data that you need in that component. Great question, though. And that comes up a lot in Redux. Functional component does not have its own state, but it does receive props. Correct. Any other questions on this right now? All right, let's do this one step further, and I'm going to say that this should be its own component, okay? We're reusing this over and over again, and we should be able to create its own component out of this, okay? So let's come into components again. going to create a new file, and I'm going to call this item. So we want to give reusable. Let's move back up. Components should be reusable code, right? If we're using, and grocery list, there's an argument to be made that you're never going to write another grocery list on here. You're going to have one. But grocery list has its own use. And this, we can just call one component over and over again rather than typing all of this out. So let's come in here to item. Once again, what type of component should item be? Functional, yep. And we're just going to return some JSX from it. Not quite yet. Okay, so let's come in here now. We're going to import, right? So we're in grocery list again. We're going to import item. Oh man, I wrote oyster. And now I'm going to, wait, sorry. That's where I wanted to be. And now when we return, we're going to return item. Okay. So now we have a component that this component is rendering a list of. All right. So what should we put as props on item here? We could actually go through and say ID, name, but I have a feeling that we're going to use every single one of these in that item field, right? So I'm just going to say that we should just do item. We have like 3 different items on here, which kind of sucks. Let's see, groceries map. Let's call this. Instead of item, we're going to call this food. No, I don't like having, these are 3 different things, and they're all called item. They're not always produce, but let's call this food item. Food item. Perfect. Okay, so item here is a component. We know that because it is a capitalized word. Item here, what is this? It is a prop. And this, what is this? What data type is that? It is the value, right? But what data type is it? It's an object. Okay, great. We'll save that. We'll go into our item component. And now we need to make 2 quick changes to get this to render on the screen. What is that? We're getting right here in our reference error, item is not defined. And it's telling us that on line 5, right here, this is not defined. We need to make sure that this is coming from our props, right? Props, oh my gosh. Dot item, and now we're getting another item that's not defined. We're gonna go props dot item, and there we go. Any questions on that? So let me save that. Let's go through our flow again. We have this list of groceries. It is an array. We are adding that to our state. So now we are watching for what we're calling groceries on our state. We are seeding that with that array. We are calling another component called grocery list, and we are passing whatever's on our state to that component as the prop of groceries. In groceries list, we are getting an array. We are mapping over it, over each food item, and we are then returning another component inside of there. Okay? We are passing the food item as a prop called item to it, right? So this is a component rendering an array of components, right? So we're getting deep. How deep can we go? Question for you. How deep can React go with this? As deep as our computer will allow, as deep as the space and the memory on our computer will allow, okay? We can go, and you're going to see like production level apps, you're like 40 levels deep, all right? So it goes a long ways. So go into item here, and this component is just returning some JSX with some text and a key on it. That's all it is, okay? So let's kind of, I want to break this down. This is app. This is groceries list. And each of these is item, right? I won't do them all. Maybe I will do them all. Each of these is item. Okay, so we have this bigger app, which is a component, has this smaller component in it, groceries list, and that it has a list of items in it, which are smaller components themselves. So yes, very Inception-esque. Clara, that's a great question. I will answer that right now, and then we'll go to break. The key is important because it is what React goes on when it's trying to determine whether or not it should update or re-render the component. So this is important for React. It needs to be unique because it needs to be unique for this component because React goes through and serializes all the keys for the components, and then it looks down the list and it says, did that one change? And it says, no, that one didn't change. Okay, did that one change? React isn't looking for props.item.name. It's looking for the key. So that's why it's important to have a unique key for each item for each component in the list. And actually, yeah, never mind. You do not. Only when you have a list of them. It will re-render if you have a key. It'll just give you a nasty error, and it'll probably re-render every single time because it doesn't know whether or not it should re-render, so it's just going to re-render it. That's why you get that error. That's why you get a warning and not a complete breakdown of your app. Because it's going to say, this isn't good practice, you shouldn't do this, but it's not going to say the app is broken because it'll still work. It'll just re-render it every time. Exactly, Amy. We are right after the break, Reed. Thank you for that. 5-minute timer. See you in 5. All right, let's do this. Come on back, and we will keep on going. So, for the time being, our list is appearing on the screen. We don't really have to worry about really messing with this grocery list or this items list or this each item. So let's come back to our index, and now we want to add an item to this list. Okay, so before we go to add an item to the list, I think that with a little forethought, we can understand that our input and our button should be its own component. And that we can create a component, and then we can worry about updating the state in a minute, right? So let's come back into components, and let's go to create file, and we're going to put input. We'll just call this input input form. Call this input form. .js. Cool. So let's go through our. If you ever see a random Slack message post from me that's just like import, that's what I just did essentially. I think I'm typing on one screen and I'm not. All right, import React from React. There are libraries that out there that'll autocomplete that for you. And actually, this one might have it. Nope. Okay. So let's think about our list from last night. Thinking about a form. What type of component should a form be? And why? I have two classes. I have state. Yeah, it's going to be a class, right? And I think Cody hit it right on the head because we want it to be a controlled form. We want to use state in order to control our input field. So I'm going to use a class component here. And I'll call this input, if I can spell. Right? So we have class component. What else comes after our class? Does this work? It might work, but it's not going to. So what do we need to do? We need all of the awesomeness that comes with React component, right? Extends React component. And in this case, I'm going to destructure component out and just use component. Same thing, same exact thing, okay? Nothing has changed on here. I've just grabbed component from the React library instead of having to type out react.component. Whichever one you prefer is totally fine. All right, yep, then we need our constructor. We need our super. And I'm even going to put in props here, okay? Why am I putting in props here? So remember that the constructor is essentially new and then React gives it the props. So this is what when new is called, this is what's going to be in the constructor. Whatever's in this, okay, is going to get passed in here. React actually passes our props into there. We want those props. We want to pass them to super because then super will give us something called this.props. All right. And one last thing we're going to do is we're going to create state on here because if we weren't, then why are we building a class component? And we're going to leave that blank for a minute. Finally, we need to give it a render method. Remember, you always have to have a render method. And inside of it, we are going to return some JSX. So we can say Let's just see if it works. Div, well, let's go H3, H2. H2, does it work? Let's go into our index, into our components list here. Import input form from and we're going to put it in our header here. I don't want to put it. Yeah, well, I don't know if it'll work. And it will work. I didn't know if the CSS would work. So now we have it. Does it work? Cool. It's working. We're importing that component. It's working. Beautiful. All right. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to create a form, right? We're going to use the form element. Inside of here, we are going to give it an input. We can say type. Let's say type is text. We want to see what the type is. So now, this is where we are going to differ a little bit. We now need to, oh, let me actually see something real quick while I'm here. Works, perfect, I'll do this, this will look better. We now need to give it a value, right? We need the value in there. And so where do we get that value from? So we could put a placeholder on there. We will put a placeholder on here. But that's not going to be our value. On change method, we will have an on change method on here. That won't be our value. Props, not yet. It's going to be our state, right? This is a controlled input. So that means that it's going to be controlled by our state. So we're going to say item. And we're going to give it just nothing right now, right? Our initial value is going to be nothing. So now we're going to say our value is whatever this is in the state. So let's go this.state.item. All right. Do you ever remember that? Everyone, does that make sense for right now? That's where we're getting it. So if we come in here and obviously our state isn't updating, it will never be updated right now. Any questions on that? Yep. Okay, let's move on with it. This is essentially what we did last night. So placeholder, we're going to say new food item. We'll just say that for, look at it, there's our placeholder, right? We're going to say with the name, what should we give it this the name of? So the name of this input be? Any guesses? To make things easy, I would name it item. This is going to be the only input in our entire form, so we can give it whatever name we want, but let's just give it the name of item just for the sake of that's the way we do things, okay? And now we finally need to give it one more thing in order to get it to start doing its thing. What is that? We have an export up here already. We need to give it a change handler. So the onChange. And we don't have a change handler yet for it. Oh, come on, just so we can write our change handler in here. Input handler. But and in here, we are going to call a certain method. What method are we going to call? We're not going to call onChange in our onChange. We're going to call setState. Exactly. We want to change our state. Every time the input changes, we want to change the state. And in this case, we don't have to do prev state because we're not basing it on the previous state. So we can say, and actually we can say item, but let's do it our fancy way of doing it. We can say event.target.name is event target.value. I was like, what is it? And now in our onChange, what are we going to write? Yes, remember we're going to write this dot input handler because this is on our prototype of this class. So we're going to have to say this dot input handler. And now it should, man, I wish Prettier would kick in. There it goes. Whew, that long input was bugging me. So now it'll work. Sweet. All right, let's keep on going. We need a button. Button, the type of submit. Just like input doesn't necessarily need a type of text, button doesn't need a type of submit. It automatically defaults to that, but we're going to do it anyways, just for the sake of understanding what it does. Reed, that is a great observation there. All handlers were supposed to be on the parent app. I would say that this form, this handler needed to be inside of here. We could very easily put the new, there's a couple of different ways to do it. Let's see. Yeah, we'll do it that way. Great observation. Thanks, Reed. We're gonna do all of this up on the parent because it's a little bit more complicated to pass this data up from here. So we can do this on the parent. That's totally fine. Let's go into here and let's say on our parent state, we're gonna go item. This is just an easier way of doing it. If I were writing this in a production app, I would write it like this. But cool, Edgar, that's what we're going to do. We're not even going to change it to a functionals because that's a waste of time right now. But we're going to take this state off of here. We are going to take our input handler off of here. And then I'll go through what I just did. That's fine. Okay. And then we are going to now pass those two items down as props. So Douglas, it's a little bit more complicated, but you would create a wrapped function that returns a new function, and then you would call it with the input handler. But we'll do it this way because this is way simpler. I've made this mistake before because it's not very difficult, but it's a little bit more difficult doing it the other way. Okay, so we have the item and the input handler on our main app now. We need to pass this down to our input form. And we're going to say input handler. So what are we going to pass down as our item and our props? That's correct, Wilford. You'll learn it, Douglas. Don't worry. This is just an introduction right now on how we do this. Dot item. And we pass our input handler down as which. Well, let's look, right? Is our input handler on our state? You got it. No worries. We're going to just say this dot input handler. We no longer need to bind because we're using the class property shorthand. So binding is rarely necessary anymore, Kaiser. All right. Come back into our input form, and then instead of this dot state dot item, what is it going to be? It's going to be this dot props dot item. And on change, instead of this dot input handler, what is it going to be? It's going to be this dot props. Remember, this is a class component, even though we're not using state right now. So we need to use this dot prop. So let's see, it should work the same as it always does. Okay, yes, this will make things much easier for us. Cool. So let me save this, and there we go. Remember, so this could very well be, this should be a functional component now that we're not using state, but I'm not going to take the time to go through and refactor that out, just for the sake of our time schedule right now. Got it. Yeah, Claire, I was saying that as you wrote that. Great observation. Okay, so one thing we need to do now that we can write and update this item, we want to add that item to our state, correct? How are we going to do this? We would need a submit handler or like an add item handler, right? Just the same as we have an input handler. So let's go add, I'm going to call it add item. Find the I key. Add item handler. And what argument is add item handler going to take? Can't see me smiling, but this is a trick question. Let's think about it. Do we need to worry about the event when we click that button? Oh yeah, we do. Yeah, you're right. Oh, you caught me on that one. We do. Those of you that said event, and Kaiser, you got me. So we do need an event. Okay, so we will take that. Does anyone know why we need the event? Prevent default. Yep. We don't care about the event at all except for prevent default. Okay, because remember, if I click that, we got to refresh of the screen. So we want our prevent default in here. So we're just going to go straight off the bat and throw that in there. Now, we can click that in. Oh, come on. Oh, yeah, we haven't done it yet. We haven't hooked it up. Let's hook it up. Christopher, we do not want to refresh our React app. What happens when you refresh your React app? Your state gets reset. So we want to give this add item handler to the form here. How do we do that? We need to do one thing first before we do on submit. Yeah, we need to pass it as a prop, right? So Sean got that. So we need to pass it down as a prop. There's a question, is input handler, atom item handler, blah, blah, blah handler, is that common? Yeah, pretty common. You want to just name this what it does, okay? So handler is a pretty common thing, but if it just said add item, we would know what it did, right? But handler is also pretty common because it's called, usually referred to as an event handler. So we're just going to pass it in as such. Right? It's going to do our input form. And now our form, we can just say on submit. And what will we write for this? How would we pass it into our on submit? Boom. Anyone else? Okay. This dot props dot add item handler. Yeah, we're gonna write this dot props, right? Because this is a prop. So let's think about this. We are passing now a method as a prop. Okay. So we're passing this entire method down. We're passing this entire method down as a prop, and then we are calling that in here. All right. So essentially what we're doing, and this isn't 100% passing data back up, but we can use this way to pass data back up to our state. That's a bit of a more difficult way of doing things. That's how I was going to do it originally, and we will talk about how to pass data up. But for now, we are using the component down here to call a method that's written in the index. Okay, so this is a really important concept to get in React, that we can pass methods down that essentially are going to set the state on our React on this app, on this component, right? So it's really important to get this pattern down. All right, so now I should be able to click this all I want, and it doesn't reload. You can hear me clicking it now. It doesn't reload. Perfect. Let's go write this function out, this method out. All right, let's look at this. What we want to add an item to our list of groceries. What data type does our item need to be? I have an object, I have a string, I have an object. Anyone else? Right, so let's look at our original list. It's an array of objects, right? We do have a name on here. We have an ID, and we have a purchased on here, but this is an object. We want to create a new object because we want to add an object to this array or to the groceries state. So we do want to create a new object. So let's do that. Let new food. I'm going to call this new food item. So it needs a few things. It needs a purchased. It needs an ID. Sandbox kills me sometimes. And it needs a name, right? So what should our purchased be? Every single time. If we are adding a new food item, our purchase should automatically be false. If we're adding an item, we have not purchased this thing yet, right? All right, ID, we're going to do something called date.now. I can show you what it does. It essentially creates a Unix timestamp. Yeah, you could do date.getTimes divided by 1000 times math.random exponent 17 if you want. We don't need to do any of that. We're just going to use date.now because for our purposes, this is unique enough. But for those of you that don't know what date.now is, it is just creates a Unix timestamp. And those that don't know what a Unix timestamp is, it is milliseconds since January 1st, 1970, I believe. So that's how many milliseconds it has been since January 1st, 1970, right? And I'm sure the year 2038 problem is way crazier than the year 2000 Y2K bug. So that's what it does. So this is going to be our new ID, right? You could do divided by math.floor, multiplied by math.random, whatever you want to do. We don't need to do that. And then what's our name going to be? I'm assuming by 2038, I don't know, we're probably not going to be running Unix or Linux, but who knows? It's been since the 70s, so. Yeah, we're going to do this dot state dot name. Okay. Oh, yeah, that's why I wasn't formatting right. There we go. Okay. So now that we have this, we are going to update our state. How do we update our state? We're going to use set state. If I use set state, we're going to use this dot set state. Why is it this dot set state? Why isn't it just set state? Where does this even come from? Remember, when we call super, it's going to call React component and give us all of the methods that React component has. Set state is one of those, okay? So that's why we have this dot set state. That automatically puts that on our class. All right. Now we can do groceries, and should we do this? There's two things wrong with this right now. What are the two things wrong with this? Mutating the state. We never want to mutate our state. We always want to return a new version of our state, okay? So yeah, we don't ever want to groceries.push. So what do we want to do instead of that? Yeah, we can use the spread operator. And I'm not going to say that this is wrong here. Could there be issues where we run into this being wrong? If I do spread operator on groceries and then new food item. Could there be issues? Yes, there could be issues. Will this work most of the time? I would say that for our use case, it's going to work every time. But let's not get in that our use case thing. Let's actually update the state as it currently stands. And in that case, we don't want to do this either, right? Because that could be wrong. So what we want to do is, no, that's fine. This is okay. This using the spread operator, it's the calling this dot state that's not okay, right? So this dot set state takes two different arguments. It could take an object, but it can also take what? A function, a callback function. Okay. And the callback function, I think it does give you more than one argument, but we only really care about one argument. So we're going to do this. We're going to come in here and do this. Then we're going to remember, if you use this way, you must return an object. Okay. And now instead of this dot state, we're going to say previous state. Someone posted the video, I'm sure you all watched it today, of Ryan Hamblin talking about why we use this. And had a great example of it. I really hope that you watched it to see why we would need to use this, because if we use this dot state, it's not guaranteed that that is current. Okay. If we use previous state, this is guaranteed that it's current as of the time that set state is called. All right. So just keep that in mind. For our case here, probably a bit of overkill, but we don't want to, nothing is more frustrating than an unrepeatable bug in your code. When you spend like 4 hours trying to figure out a bug in your code and it's only happens every like 14 clicks and it's random to how many clicks that is, that's the most frustrating thing in a software developer's life. So get in the habit of, if you are using the previous state inside of your new state, use this way. Why don't you need this previous state? That's a great question, Justin, because previous state is being passed to us as an argument. So this is a function that previous state is being passed as an argument. We don't have access to this previous state inside of here, outside of this function, okay? We don't have access to it out there. You're right. It should be this state item. That would have been an error. Also, this is wrong, right? If we're saying that this is wrong, then this must be wrong as well. That we use. Why can we use this state item out here, but not in here? This could be updated by the time this gets called, right? So we need to take this and put it into here. And then instead of this state item, we need to use previous state item. Okay? So now we're creating a new array. We're putting all of the old groceries in there, and we're adding a new item in here. So this is kind of a funky way of writing it all. This is prettier. That's making it look like this. But essentially, we're saying return this object, change the groceries to this array, give it all the previous groceries, and this new one. All right. Jacob, this way will work 100% of the time. I don't like to say 100%, but it will work 100% of the time. Okay, the other way will not work 100% of the time. We should use the other way when we're not using the previous state to update our state. All right, so in this case, right here, we are not using the previous state to update our state. We are using the event target name and the event target value as it exists. Okay, so we don't need to do that whole rigmarole, right? In this case, we do, because there could be a time when set state gets called and it sits in what's called the event loop. And this is, you'll learn about this in Node as well. And it might take a little bit for this to get to this. And in that time, something else may have updated the state. Okay. And then when we get to it, it's like, nope. We said this state at the time it was called, when previous state is going to be the actual state, no matter what. Will be the actual state no matter what. All right. Let's go see if it works. New food. What should we buy? Raw honey. What needs to go on our grocery list? What is an essential item on a grocery list? Bacon. Okay, let's go with bacon. Look at that. Got it. Beer, cookies, bacon, eggs. I think we got it, right? One thing about this that I dislike, I don't like to have. All right. Ooh. Bacon, kale. Got to be a little healthy in it. Bread, gotta get it. All right, water, chocolate. Then we got a list going on here. Cool, we've got our items now. All right, any questions on this and adding an item to our list? How can we make the button? Wait, do you mean deselect? Well, thank you, Will, for asking that question because we're going to talk about that when we get back after the break. So let's come back in 5. If you have any questions, please post them in Slack. And see you in 5 minutes. All right, come on back. I'm just reading all your questions / Will must be psychic. All right. Well, does it say day 2 in your project by any chance? Because I saw you wrote day 2 on there. Ugh, this is my pet peeve. Okay, I'm gonna get that changed because it should say. Not sure how I write that, but okay. So let's move back in and let's start getting it so that we can actually buy these items and change that false of purchased to true. Okay. So what do we need to do in order to do that? Anyone have any suggestions right now? Just the first step. Add a click handler. Cool. Where are we going to add that click handler to? We're going to add it to the item, right? So we want a click handler on this item. So we want to say on click. And I'm going to put just that in there so that React doesn't scream at us. So now we have a click handler on this item. Do we want to write the click handler inside of this? We do not, right? Because what are we doing with that? What's that click handler doing, essentially, in the grand scheme of things? It's changing the state, right? And our state exists on our app. Okay, so we want to write our click handler up here on our app and pass it down to that item. All right. So let's do this. Let's call this toggle item. We'll just call it toggle item. All right. So we got a click handler. All right. So let's think about this for a minute. What item do we need? What bit of data do we need in order to toggle the item on the state properly? Yeah, we need that one, right? So I can come in here and write bacon and bacon on here. And I have 3 bacons on here, which is probably looks like some of your grocery lists. But so I don't want to do it by name. I want to do it by ID because each of these has its own unique ID on it. Okay, everything on here has its own unique ID. So we want that item ID. We'll see how to pass it in just a moment. Roasted bacon, sautéed bacon, baked bacon, bacon, turkey bacon. But so we want that ID because it's unique. Okay. So we're going to see that in a moment. Now do we need to worry about the event on here? Okay. Do we need to worry about the event? Nah, click handler doesn't have a default functionality. Not on a div. Okay, there's no default functionality for clicking on a div. It just doesn't exist. So we don't need to worry about it on here. So now let's do this. Let's pass this item down. So where do we want to add this as a prop to? This toggle item. Grocery list, right? Because the item is in grocery list. So let's do that. We're going to say this dot toggle item. Okay, now we go into grocery list. And now we have props.toggle item on grocery list. And now what do we need to do? We need to pass it down again. So this is a concept known as prop drilling, where grocery list has no concern for that toggle item function. Has no concern, but it's this intermediary. It needs to pass through grocery list. And we solve issues like this with Redux, which we are going to talk about in a month. So now we're going to say, now I say toggle item on item, and what do I put into here? Props. Remember, it's on our props dot toggle item. It like always bugs me to have to do this because you'll have some that are like you have to prop drill down like 5 levels just to get the the state on the upper level changed. Okay, so we only have to do through 1. Now on item, we can come in here and inside of our on click. So what if I just did this? This is what would happen here. I click it, and then what would item ID equal? I could click it. That event is fired. This is called, right? Let's look into here for a second. We can look and it works, okay? It gets called, but if I said item ID the right way, and I open this up. Ooh, yeah, there we go. We should get it undefined. We're actually getting the event from it. We don't really care about or want the event. So it's not the item ID, it's the actual event, okay? So what we need to do is what I was going to do to the input form earlier, is we need to wrap this into another function. Okay, we can do it a couple of different ways. I'm going to do it this way because it's really easy to do it this way right now. But sometimes you need to do it another way. So this is how we pass data back up, right? So input form, all of this was sort of passing data up in the form of that event, but it wasn't really. We're actually passing data back up now. We're passing this. You could bind it. We don't want to bind things right now. We're going to use the arrow function to do things. You could bind it if you wanted to, but we don't need to. In this way, what's going to happen is we're going to click. So I'm going to call it right here. We're going to click on this. That's going to get fired, right? That function is going to get fired. And inside of that, we're going to call another function, right? We're not able to, I mean, I guess if we use the dot bind, we could bind another argument to it, but we don't want to do that. So now it's going to call it, and it's going to say, yeah, it's clicked. So this function is going to get called, and then it's going to call the props. And we are then able to pass data in to be passed up. And what do we want to put our data in as? Props.id. Props.item.id. Okay. Props.item.id is what we want to pass up. And now, let's come into here. Oop, where is it at? And we'll say item ID. And we're getting the ID of the exact item that was clicked. Okay. So now we're able to pass data back up to our state. This is very important as to how this works. Okay, so we're able to pass data back up to our state. So we essentially send a little rope down the well to our item, and it puts some some data into a bucket, and then the app pulls that bucket back up and gets that data. So let's walk through it. We got time. Toggle item is a method. We're passing it down as a prop, right? We know that we can pass methods and functions down as props to grocery list. Grocery list is passing it through. It's just not even stopping. It's like just going straight through town to item. Okay. In this case, let's think about what happens. Let's just think about what happens when something is an on-click callback. So this is essentially where our event lives now, if we wanted it to. Okay. On-click is a callback, right? That is going to be called no matter what when we click on something. Okay, it's going to be called. We don't have the ability to add extra data to whatever's in here. We don't have the ability to do that unless you use bind, but that's a different subject. So we can only get the event object from it. Inside of here, we could call another function. All we're doing is calling this function and passing it some data. Okay, that's all we're doing. So it would be the same as if we called this anywhere else and we passed it an ID. That's all it's doing. All right. It's then getting that ID where it's created. Right. It's getting that ID. You could query, you could bind, you could apply, call, all kinds of stuff. I don't want to call it a daisy chain. We're passing this method down and it's being called with some data. That's all that's happening. This is a tough concept to get. Trust me, I completely understand it. This is a tough concept. And don't feel like because this doesn't make complete sense to you that you're totally lost. This is hard, right? But this is important. Until we get to Redux, then this all gets so much easier. But this is going to take work. You have to work on this stuff. With React, this is only going to get more difficult as we go, but it's going to become so much more powerful. So we can now use that to change some data on our upper level, right? I think the hardest part of this is understanding the path that it takes. That's the hardest part of this. This is, I mean, I'm on the sprint challenge, I'm sure it is, to be able to pass data back up. You have plenty of time to work on your project and to look at all of this code. So let's use that. Now that we're getting that item ID, right? We are getting that item ID for each one. Let's look at that and use that to change what that is in there. So what method can we use to change that? We could use filter, but filter is going to remove items. We don't really want to remove items. So first we're going to use set state. Okay. And since we are going to be updating the state based on the old state, we are going to use previous state. Honestly, if you don't get this the first time, then you're never going to get it. No, I'm just kidding. It's fine if you don't get this the first time. This is hard. All right. No, it's like really hard. Like I didn't get this the first time. Like it's difficult, you know. I'm just kidding. Like this is really hard stuff. Like it really is. So don't worry if you're like I don't get this. You know, I personally did not get this the first time I did it. So just keep working on it. It takes a lot of work, and that's really what it goes for from here on out. It's going to take a lot of work, and that's the reason we have, training kit prep, and that's the reason we have lectures, and that's the reason we have projects, and we keep going on and on and on and on. Okay, so. All right, so let's come through here now, and we're going to return, right? We want to return an object because we're setting the state. We want to return an object, and we want to return groceries, right? That's what we're going to do. Now we're going to go through that list of groceries, and we're going to change one item on that list, right? What can we do that iterates through a list and changes something about what's in that array? Which method does that? Filter does do that, but filter removes items from the array. Slice could work, but we're going to use map for right now. Remember, what does map return? A new array. So are we mutating the state if we use map? No, because it returns a new array, right? So we're going to use previous state dot map, or got groceries dot map. Okay, map takes a single argument, which is a callback. It's going to have an item. We'll just call it an item. We'll call it food item because we called it before. Now, what do we want to check for on food item? We're not removing items that have been purchased. We merely want to toggle them right now. You can go through and filter them after this if you'd like. What we're checking for is if this food item's ID is equal to this item ID, right? So we're going to say if food item dot ID is equal to item ID. And if it is, what do we want to do to it? We want to set purchase to true. But here's where a funny thing is that we can't just say food item dot purchased equals true, because this is mutating. Okay, we don't want to mutate. So what we can do is return a new object with food item and purchase of true. So what this is doing is this is creating a new object. This is spreading all of the items out, and this is changing purchase to true. So this is returning a new object for us. We do not want to, I guess we want to do. You're right. We want to toggle. So this is going to return a new item for us. Otherwise, it'll say true forever. This will return a new item for us, okay, into our array. Otherwise, if we don't do that, what do we want to do? We just want to return whatever the item is, right? Exactly. So this is going to toggle the item on and off for us. Okay. This is a difficult one, right? This is pretty hard. I'm going to remove that. This is a tough one. This is getting into some funky territory where we're like, I didn't know we could mutate an object inside of another array that was not being mutated. Well, line 75 is doing. 75 is just asking if that food item's ID, remember this is going to map over each item, is equal to the item ID that we were given. This is spreading all of the items or all of the key value pairs in that food item out, and then we are changing the purchased. And we're returning that as a whole. So it's only going to change that one item. I'm going to save that. This is difficult stuff. So if you're like, I'm lost, I'm totally lost, that's fine. This is difficult stuff. You can come back and watch the lecture. All of this stuff is in Training Kit. But yeah, you'll just have to study it a lot and work on it a lot. This is what it's all about. Is most, I would say, most of what is to come in this course is not going to come your first time seeing it. It's going to take a lot of work and a lot of studying. And it just keeps going. Yep, keep hammering away. Why we'd have to spread food items to change purchase key? We could do something like name is food item dot name and ID is food item dot ID. We could do this. That's actually, that seems to be a little more straightforward. So let's do that. Cool. It's the same thing. It's exactly what it's doing. Cool. All right, let's do it this way. One more thing I want to, it's actually toggling it now, by the way, but you can't see it. So I'm going to do a little trick on our item itself. And I'm going to use a ternary operator on here. Let's go let purchased equal. If you haven't seen a ternary operator, here's one in action. Props dot item dot purchased. This is essentially a compact if statement is what this is. It's saying if this is true, then purchased equals that. Otherwise, it equals in React. And then I'm going to add this because we have a special we have a special class on purchase that'll strike through. Did it really cut out, or was I just speaking erratically? Okay, so I created a ternary operator here. This is essentially a different sort of if statement that's going to make purchased either equal to this string or equal to that string based on what this is true or false. I've then added it to our class here. So if it is purchased, then we're going to get a strike through. If it isn't, then it's just going to look like it does right now. All right. That was just a way to show that it's actually working. So let's go see if it actually is working. It is working. Yeah, I would do null. Null would work. We have you can come into our style and see right there. So if we have an item and it also has the purchased class on it, it will give a text declaration of line through and it will change the background color. We don't have time to do the clear them all, but I can add that to, it's actually really much, much more simple than doing the toggle. Clear is just a filter, essentially. And I'll add that to this tonight and I'll send it over to you. I'm sure there's a lot of questions. I'm sure there's a lot of confusion. I really think that your best bet right now is to jump in and start trying to implement this yourself. Start working on it. Start messing around with it. Start getting it to break. You'll eventually get it to work, and then it'll be the greatest moment ever when you get it to work. And then you'll have a new problem, right? And then there's something else that comes along. It's what this is all about. So, like I said, you know, nothing from now on is going to come to you first try. This is going to take a lot of effort and a lot of work and a lot of study and a lot of banging your head against the wall and wanting to throw your computer out the window. And then you have these moments of epiphany that are the greatest feelings in the world. And then you go right back to it. And you read error messages until it finally strikes through. And then you get another error message. So that's just software development. And we all love it, right? It's amazing because you do get those awesome things where you build cool things. So don't be discouraged if you are very confused and don't quite get this yet. Nobody gets it the first try. And you will get it. Just keep working hard on it, okay? And please don't be discouraged by it because everyone goes through the same thing. But that's our lesson for tonight. Thanks for joining me. Work hard on this. Good luck on your sprint challenge this weekend, and I'll see you all on Monday. Good night, everyone.